We're at the end of the Maimer. So at the beginning of the Maimer, he pointed out that throughout Bilam's prophecies, he makes reference to Yaakov and Yisrael. The Avodah, the goal, the nature of the Avodah, the consequence of the Avodah. And this is all explained now at the end of the Maimer. As he traces through the Avodah of Yaakov and Yisrael, these two levels of Birur, and the parallels above and below, and the future consequence, Mashiach's coming, all this was laid out in the Maimer, which we're going to give an overview of as we review the Maimer, but let's conclude it now. So the Hibit, this is the pasuk, is the Hibit often Bi'Yakov Omer B'Yisrael, that there's no iniquity in Yaakov and toil in Yisrael. So all of the levels now, and the Mashiach have these two levels of Yaakov and Yisrael. Yaakov is Avdi Yaakov, my servant, his hand grasping on the heel of Esau. That's the battle to elevate him. And we have to, therefore, Altira, this Avodah begins Mitzvah Shabbos, and we've seen that wonderful composition. I find out who composed it, but it goes back a while, certainly. Do not fear my servant Yaakov. And we have to be sure that there is no oven, that there's no iniquity, because you're engaged in the world, so it comes with the pitfalls and temptations. And the inevitable falls, but that's followed by tshuva. And then there's the Avodah of Shabbos. Israel, we mentioned that in order that the person does not fall prey to sin, Hashem helps him, but he has to bring his fire. That's the h'tשכ, that's Avodah, which will, in the Rebbe's words here, a person cannot be, well, so it's possible to be excited about opposite things, but not really. One of them is a wannabe. The other one is the real me. So if there's a real fire, an enthusiasm, a real excitement in Kedusha, then that negates the excitement in Klippa and the opposite things. And that's engendered in Avodas Hatfilah. So there's these two levels. That's all the Chayil. That's Yaakov. Then it goes on now to Moishe Mashiach. Mashiach, there's two stages, Yilchem Mechemes Hashem, and even the Maila, the Eivish is sullied and bloody in his battle against Edom, against Rome, the Avodah of Gevurah, similar to the Avodah of the fire. Fire is Gevurah. Fire is produced by the consumption of the fuel. Gevurah demands giving up. And this Adin says, what are you surrendering? It's only in your surrender that the fire can be produced and that the battle can be won. The rage and the battle, and all of this transforms it ultimately. As he says, that the Torah says, who can count the dust of Yaakov and the quarter, or the Reva Yisrael, the two Perushim, quarter of the camp, 1/4 of the encampment, or Reva refers to the seeding of Israel. So he says, Mi Mola, who can count the number that refers to the fusion, who can count beyond number, and then the number, the fusion of Bli Gvul and Gvul is Streng L'Kut Torah. So the Inyan Zen Nasa, up to page footnote 108. All of this is achieved to the two levels of Avodah. Both the Avodah is the weekday, where it has to be like Hibit Oven Bi'Yakov and Yaakov. Hein Ba'Avodah the Shabbos, Boifin Le'Ra'am B'Yisrael, the higher Avodah. Adilation B'Shnei and Mavaya, the Kavim, as the pasuk concludes, Hashem is with him. It requires Hashem's assistance, of course, in all of the avodas. And through our avodah, tracing through the next, it's going through the psukim now. So the next is that we establish in Yiddish Stelpen Uf, we establish Oyalecha, Yaakov, Mishkanisecha, Yisrael, your tents, Yaakov, your dwelling places, Yisrael, Baruch look at the Torah. Atem explains in the Torah, Dalet Inyane, Avedish was at the 4 levels, Oyel, Yaakov, Mishkan, Yisrael. Ideas are boy in the Kima Yid, and he continues belong to the fulfillment of the prophet, the prophecy of Mashiach, the Dorach, Koichav Yaakov, a star will shoot forth from Yaakov, a Kom Shevet B'Yisrael, and a leader, a ruler will arise from Yisrael. So here too, the 2 stages, Tchila, Ba'ifan Shel Koichav. First a star. Star is a small, can hardly see through cotton that is small. The pasuk says, Miyokum Yaakov, who will rise up with Yaakov, Ki cotton, for he is small. Pasuk in Amos, talking about after the great famine, Hashem prophesies that the Navi prophesies will come. Sha'oz yirakas cholas hadricha. Talking about Dorach Koichav Yaakov, that a star will shoot forth. That's only the beginning. She'yorek kechetz. He shoots forth like an arrow, Rashi explains. That's what the word Dorach means, to shoot like an arrow. And what does that all imply? An arrow, that's the first stage, the battle. Rambam describes Yilchem Mechemes Hashem, that Mashiach will fight God's wars. That's Dorach Koichav Yaakov. And then the Lachazek becomes Shevet Yisrael, and a leader will rise up. The word Shevet means a staff. Sheshevet Koyal Makal Noyam to Mashiach. There's 2 kinds of staff. There's a staff that's required to strike, and there's a staff that leads, a pleasant staff. So this refers to the pleasant staff, Makal Noyam. Not that is not a staff of retribution, but of leadership, of guidance. Like he explains that the Rabbi Marash and the Hemshech v'Kocha, Hemshech v'Hechrim, and the other Hemshech v'Hechrim, famous Hemshechim of Rabbi Marash. Then we won't need the staff that injures. This is a reference to, says in the footnote, Zechariah, he speaks about the 2 kingdoms, the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom, after the death of Shlomo. So Shlomo's son Rehoboam said, I will rule you even with even greater force, strike, tax, punitive measures. And Yeroboam promised a pleasant, so the Navi speaking about this was all by divine plan, these 2 kingdoms, the 2 kinds of staff. But they won't need the makal chayvlim, the staff that it injures, the injurious staff. In order, because Hashem will remove the impurity from the world. So it'll be the become Shevet min Yisrael, Makal Noyam, the pleasant staff. Mashiach said, "Kain ba'gola didan." Mashiach is coming in our time. Sha'oz yikuyim, mashikosav, and then will be fulfilled that which the pasuk says, "Yisrael oisachoyel," and Yidden will perform valiantly. And the Hadgosha, the emphasis here being on Yisrael. That'll be the avodah of Yisrael, the second stage in Mashiach's coming. All right, let's have an overview of the Maimon. Let's go back to the beginning. It's a rather lengthy Maimon. And there's much in the Maimon, but it's all one Nakuda, it's all one model. It's all Yaakov and Yisrael. That's the whole Maimon, right? And then let's begin our journey. So the Maimon begins with Hibit and Bi'Yakov Yisrael. So this distinction between Yaakov and Yisrael is emphasized throughout all the Nevuos. 5 psukim. At the end of the Maimon, he revisited them all. and threaded them all together. Let's try and do it together now. The very first pasuk is that Bilam states why he's coming. He's coming to do what? Utterly Yaakov, curse Yaakov. L'cha zoyma Yisrael, zoyma, another word there, means rage against Yisrael. So this is pre-avodah. This is what we have to, this is unrefined. This is before the avodah seberurim has begun. Oh, as he says outright. So the Netzutze Kedusha, as he mentioned at the end of just a few yesterday's oyster, last oyster. The Netzutze Kedusha have fallen into the world, embedded in Gashmias, they're dead. So there already, he says, there's these two levels. He hasn't really explained that at length. Already there's Yaakov and Yisrael. Could mean there's the Netzutze Kedusha that are awaiting redemption. There's the Netzutze Kedusha that Yaakov has to elevate and extract from Klippa. And then there's the Netzutze Kedusha that Yisrael has to extract, and that's the Eichel Matoich Eichel, the Avodah of Shabbos, Gan Eden Elyon, and so on. But this description here, it's all negative. Cursed and furious death, spiritual death. So that's the first stage. That's describing the stage, the setting of the Avodah. So that's the setting. Then comes the first nevuah. This is the consequence of the first pasuk was Balak said this. And Balak asked, Bilam, he stated his intent. Curse Yaakov and rage against Yisrael. So already begins the process of transformation. What does Bilam say? Mimona afar Yaakov mispar esrei Yisrael. Who can count the earth of Yaakov and the number of Reiva Yisrael, which just said the two meanings. But in general, it means, as he says here, the many Netzutze Kedusha that you didn't elevate through the Avodah. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, we just learned the meaning of this pasuk is that through their Avodah, Mimon, who can count? They bring and elevate the sparks to Kedusha, bringing the revelation of Blikvol, of Hashem's infinite presence into the world. I think later, Reiva Yisrael, Reiva also means four, a reference to Elam Atzilus. So this is the outcome. The outcome is going to be the elevation of all the sparks. The Mi Monafar Yaakov or Mispar Reiva Yisrael. How is it done? The pasuk continues, and that's what our mind focuses on. Hibit of Bia'Akiv le'Rama Yisrael. Which means there's Avodah of Yaakov, which potentially, God forbid, could lead to Oven. And even once that is done, there's a new Avodah. But there's going to be Omel there, there's toil there. That will not be negating. There's toil in the Avodah of Yaakov. But hopefully not Oven. Hashem helps. Again, he said, there inevitably will be Oven, but there's Tshuva. But Omel, for sure, is present in the Avodah engaging the world of the Yaakov. Then there's Loi Rama B'Yisrael, and that is the Avodah of, as he goes to say, Shabbos, Gan Eden Elyon, Eichel Matoich Eichel. Oh, he mentions Tshuva even here. And that leads to Ateva Lecha Yaakov, which Nesech so much the mind didn't explain. He just refers us to look at the Torah. 4 levels of Ohel, Yaakov, Mishkan Yisecha, Yisrael, which basically covers all Torah mitzvahs, including Tshuva. And all of this then results in what's the result? Mashiach's coming. And what's Mashiach's coming? Darach Koichav Yaakov becoming Shevet Yisrael. And finally, Yisrael Yisachayil, the final pasuk is Bilam's final prophecy. This highest, ultimate level, Mashiach comes after the Milchama, and then comes the Shevet Makel, the Shevet Makel Noyam, and then Yisrael Eisachayel, Israel does valiantly. That's the highest culminating level. All right, so, right, the first ois, in retrospect, of the benefit of being learned the mind, we understand all the psukim and the seder, the pre-avodah, the result of avodah. We're told right away we're going to elevate the sparks. Imon afar Yaakov, how you get there, lahibit oven, omol. That's the actual avodah, which leads to mativ alecha Yaakov, which he did not explain. But he just said no. It's the general Torah mitzvahs and tshuva. That's what the Maimon tells us here, and that leads to Darach Kochav Meyaakov become Shevet Yisrael, and finally Yisrael Eisachayel. Yeah, folks, we're clear. Yes, more or less. All right. So now Ois Beis. So Ois Beis begins the elaboration. Let's just do a quick overview. So what is it? It's all based on the Likutei Torah. So Yaakov has to contend with Oven, and we want to negate that. And Yisrael could contend with Omel, and we want to negate that. Now, why could Yisrael contend with Omel? Because there is Avodah Sabiruri. There is Avodah Sabiruri, but the Chiddush is it's a way of Tainug. That's me, not a way of Omel. But it has to be negated because there is Avodah Sabiruri. Of course, Oven has to be negated from Yaakov because he's out there in the world. So he surely has to contend with that. But that's the Chiddush in each case. So what's the difference? The difference is similar to the weekday in Shabbos. Shabbos, the weekday, the Avodas Kabbalah Soil. The Avodah of the Eved, and the Eved doesn't have any understanding. He's not inspired. It's merely the yoke of the master. And that's the inevitable matzav of every yid, because if you're engaging in the world and so on, you cannot be in an inspired state while you're trying to make a living and engaging and interacting with people and involved in it. As you learned in yesterday's Tanya, the nature of making a living is that it consumes us, which is why the greatness of tzedakah, when you give it tzedakah, is you're giving your whole chayas. Tzedakah, the fun of your halach. Yesterday's the last few days of Tanya. So that's Kabbalah Soil. And therefore, if it's only Kabbalah Soil, you're not inspired, there's temptation. So there has to be, therefore, Hibit oven Bi'Yakov. And how does that happen? It's the Eibishter that helps. And the Eibishter helps when we give it our all. And he steps in and saves us, Mishayfte Nafshe, from those that judge our soul, the Yitzhar and the Yitzhatoif. But it's going to be Omel, hopefully not sin, and if there is again tshuva, but toil, yeah, that's the whole avodah, is toil. The milchama, to extract the sparks. Avodah sabirurim. Continuing now. And that's avodah. The word avodah means service, but also implies transformation. Ibud oiris. It's a term used in the Mishnah when taking a hide and making it into leather. It's transformative. It's a difficult avodah. It's called avodas perech. The same term that's used to describe. That's the term rather describing Golas Mitzrayim. Then it's Shabbos v'chalalikim. Chalalikim means Poshet, God completed, but the deeper meaning is Vaychalalikim. The level of Alikim is completed, is ended. Alikim is Teva, a Jew engaged in the world. Now he enters and ascends to the level and transcends, and that's unlocked within him is his deeper level of his neshama. And Hashem brings us in. This is all the forbidden malachas and Shabbos. They are all the protocol by which we divest ourselves of engaging the world and enter into the palace, as it were. That's the avodah of Yisrael. Why was Yaakov called Yisrael? Because you prevailed over Elikim, referring to an angel, Esau's angel, and over people. You've prevailed over them. Sar, prince, you are above this battle. So what's revealed on Shabbos? Havaya, not Elikim. Hashem beyond creator, the infinite one. He's beyond nature. So that's the union of Le'ro Amo B'Yisrael, because there's no Amo, there's no toil, because we're beyond the Avodah Sabirudim, and that's why Beirer selection, removing unwanted from wanted, is forbidden on Shabbos, because of the Shabbos Eidek. Then came the question, is Gimel? So how is it that Avodah Karbonos? Karbonos is all about elevating. That's the fire, Eish Tamid. What's interesting here is, friends, that the Eish Tamid, it's during the week, but it's also on Shabbos. We spoke about Avodah Tefillah. The fact is that the main day for Avodah Tefillah is Shabbos, and we have time to daven. And he said at the end of the Maimer that you need to have that fire in order to counter the fire of Lumazeh, of Klippa. I'm just pointing out, but L'chayra, when does he have that? He has that on Shabbos, and Shabbos is not engaged in the world anyway. L'chayra, when should Hashem should make the world? When do you have your main davening? Dafka during the week, because that's when you need the fire. But it's not that way. During the week you have to daven, but you got to get at 8:30. You got to be out of here. 8:20 when you have to leave. You got to put bread on the table. So the simple answer is there's two Avodah Sabirurim. The Eish Tamid of Shabbos is a higher Avodah, and it's much more difficult. As we said yesterday, to go from Gan Eden Atach to Gan Eden Elyon is a bigger transition in a way than from Gehenim to Gan Eden Atach. Because Gehenim to Gan Eden Atach, Gehenim is dealing with I enjoy Elam Hazeh. Now I enjoy Elam Haba. The eyes remain the same, just purged of this pleasure to the other pleasure. The pleasure, the avodah of Shabbos is no self at all, not kirvus elikim litoy. It's a higher avodah, so therefore Shabbos is a bigger avodah satfila, because that means it's a higher avodah, a more difficult one, as it were, even though it's all about tainuk. But it also has to be said that the way a person conducts himself Shabbos has its subliminal or leaves its mark for the rest of the week. The same way the davening in the morning. You're davening in the morning. The Chassidus before, you're not thinking consciously about that during the rest of the day. It's like a furnace. It's heated up, it heats the rest of the house, even though the fire actually isn't there. So this furnace is stoked on Shabbos mainly, and each morning in Avodah Tefillah. Okay, so back to the Maimer. So Shabbos, there is Korbanos. And even after Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, we eat on Shabbos. And eating is Avodah Sabirudim. He explains, when you eat, what happens? It's a whole, the psoilus, the negativity is rejected, and the food goes through a whole process of refinement. And it goes from the stomach to the heart to the brain. And from there, life pervades the entire body. The heart divides all of the limbs, animating all of the limbs, the heart carrying the purified oxygen, etc. So Shabbos is also, so how is there achila on Shabbos? Explanation is that there's two kinds of achila. The first one is when you have actual food and you have waste, and you've got to separate them, and that's two ways: above to below, below to below, above, taking the psoilus from the oichel, or the oichel from the psoilus. That's all dealing with psoilus, with actual waste. Then we have the second avodah, and that's eichel metoich eichel. Food from food. And that is the avodah of Shabbos, and that's the avodah of Karbonos. And that we're going to explain. He begins in Ois Dalet. And Ois Dalet, which will continue our Chazara tomorrow, introduces Gan Eden Elyon and Gan Eden Tachten. And then the Har Dinur, the river of fire that's needed to purge from one level to the other, the very different rivers of fire, which means very different birurim. But there's still a birur. And as we said, in a way, the second one is more difficult. To go from self to selfless, even if the self is in Kedusha, it's a greater challenge. And that never ends. First one basically is done. Not sin, finish. Ilmaza, rejection. Okay, to be continued. Today's story. Praise Hashem tomorrow. You guys came a bit later, so I just want to tell you that I'll put it on the WhatsApp. I'm going today, Praise Hashem, to Seattle. Our newborn Nicole, to listen to Mushka and listen in Mercer Island. So we'll continue on Zoom only tomorrow at 6, and then continue next week 6:20 as the usual Seder. Be'ezer Hashem, that's the plan.